Shields and swords, feel the wars, fighting my blood down to the core. Warriors from medieval age, fear the reign of night brigades. Crusades into the room, moving through the temples and tombs. Scared and placed, prepare to face Professor Awesome and the minions of doom. 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 Professor Awesome and the minions of doom.
So I've been getting a lot of questions from people asking about the long-term effects of something like this. I think I've been getting it a lot because I've talked about the Black Plague and how it's affected things. And then a lot of people are interested in how do you think this is going to change education, particularly how we perceive online education and things like that. And when I've been having these conversations, we've really seen people go to 3 different models. And I don't think any of those models are very good. They can give us some understanding, but they're not really great models for us. So let's start with the first and I think the worst one. I'll see a lot of people comparing this to 9/11, saying things change after 9/11. And I don't think that's a really good example for a couple of reasons. The first one is it didn't really happen to everyone. And what I mean by that is most people experience 9/11 on television. Now, it just happens that in Washington, D.C. and New York, where the news is, those people who are talking on there, they experience it in a much more firsthand way. But most people in the country didn't. So, I surely met some people, at that time I was living in a town of 4,000, and there were people who were legitimately afraid and felt traumatized. But that was an irrational fear because if Al-Qaeda had decided that they were going to start attacking towns of 4,000 with no, particular strategic value, that would have, that we would have had bigger problems by that point. So it was not really an event that everyone was experiencing. Today, everyone really is, other than maybe a canceled flight or that kind of thing. Today, really, people are experiencing all your kids are home for weeks, right? You are laid off. I mean, the sheer number of people who now are suddenly laid off, just in my family alone, is shocking, considering how well everyone was doing a month ago. These are things that people are not experiencing, not as a trauma that they viewed or as a minor inconvenience based on something that happened, in a faraway place. This is something which everyone is experiencing in a real way. In point of fact, actually, very few people are experiencing the actual virus, infinitesimally small compared to the vast numbers that are experiencing big problems. So I think 9/11 is a really bad model for understanding this anyway. So if we go back further, I'm hearing a lot of Spanish flu. What about the Spanish flu? The Spanish flu. Spanish flu could have been a good model for us. There's obviously the big difference of Spanish flu was worse on young people than it was on older people, but you could still get something from that. The problem is Spanish flu happened to coincide with the First World War. And yeah, there were huge, massive social changes, but it's hard to say this particular social change occurred because of the war, which killed a bunch of young people, and this particular social change occurred because of the disease, which killed a bunch of young people. In fact, I think that the two events are so closely intertwined that there is no real way to think of this as another model. If we happen to have a world war right now, which I'm not rooting for, but if we had one, maybe we'd have a better sense of what might come out of it. But because of that, the Spanish flu, the long-term effects on society, doesn't really help us. The Black Plague helps us a little bit more, but not a lot. The problem with the Black Plague is, in terms of mortality, the wildest, most, crazy mortality claims for COVID-19 don't even approach the Black Death, don't even approach what happened there. And on top of that, our societies are just really different. So in the Black Death, you had, for example, the rise of a middle class. Why? well, it wasn't because of disease per se, it was because they all died. And suddenly, there was this huge labor shortage. And then, of course, there's a really big difference between a kind of more, manorial feudal society where the middle class is just rising, the nobility is just sort of starting to weaken, and kind of democracy with a strong middle class, all sorts of other changes, etc. So that also is not a good model. And so I really think if you're thinking long term, these three things are not great models. There are a few things we can pull from the Black Death, though. One important thing that we got from the Black Death was the reason that you had this labor shortage was that the disease killed a lot of people, but unlike a lot of wars, it didn't destroy the things. It left the infrastructure in place. So the roads still existed. The animals were still there. Everything that you would have to work, all the tools, all the systems you had in place, they were still there. They just had fewer people to do them. And so one of the things I'm really hopeful about for this is that model, is that in all this, our infrastructure is going to be fine. Now, of course, there are some things that need maintenance, but there's a big difference between, something which takes a lot of damage because it hasn't been properly maintained for a few months, and something that you're building from scratch, right? So even the bad things for that are still things that we can get back pretty easily. And so we're not going to have the same sort of labor shortage, but all the potential for all those jobs will still be there. A lot of people talk about pent-up demand and things like that. I do think that the two areas, obviously, that we're going to see the biggest changes are going to be not medicine, to be honest. I think, honestly, it's going to be education and telecommuting. And I think it's too soon to see what's going to happen with those. Either the idea of a hybrid education where part of it being in the classroom and part of it being online is going to become normalized in people's minds, and they'll think, oh, this is a thing. Or the opposite's going to happen. And we're going to have so many people who are just thrust into doing this suddenly that, the classes aren't well put together, not because the people aren't trying hard, but because they had no warning, no preparation, that maybe people will sour on the idea of any kind of online education. I kind of think that is less probable, but it is an outcome. So the truth is, using these three models, we don't really have a good answer. And I know that saying I have the answers is what people often go to these sorts of videos for. But instead, I want to just use this video instead to say, hey, those people who are pointing to these events and saying this tells us what's going to happen next, well, maybe not.